All right, quick update here on the Bobcat 642B. As you know, if you've seen the other videos, the chain case is obviously pulled out of it. Every single chain except one of them was snapped, and I decided, you know what? I'm just going to pull the whole chain case out, go through it. All new bearings, all new seals are installed in all the axle tubes. Yeah, it wasn't too bad of a job. If you know what you're doing, it's really not that bad. You could see my other video for talking about some other details of it, but moving on. There's an article online that you got to watch out for. It says that these Bobcats use the 80 roller chain, size 80, and I ordered size 80. I didn't look at the chain that came out of here. I should have. I mean, I didn't read the number on the side of it because I just saw that in an article. So I ordered that way too big. I don't know if the 743s or anything like that maybe takes that size chain. I don't know. At least my 642B, which is an earlier one, it uses 60. So I got 60H. It's the heavy duty version. A couple of things here to talk about. Number one is the way I was able to get these off the sprockets was I took a 1 1/8 inch wrench here, put it on, tightened it against the bulkhead, and then I took a pry bar and where's my pry bar? There we go. And I was able to go off the studs here like so. Now, one thing that you should do, I didn't do it with all of them, is put the lugs on here so you don't mess up the threads. I did that on some of them, as you can see, not all of them, but the same process is reversed for putting them back on. You gotta watch with the seals when you put them in here. I actually had to order a new seal. You can't let the axle rest on it because it will bend it. It'll mess up the seal, and you gotta put that in. And these are somewhat pressed in. I mean, it's safe to say that, but really I used a poor man's shop press, and I just beat the living hell out of it here. Was able to slide it in, but you have to hold it or support it as you do it. When I did the other three, I actually had it on the pallet lifter there. So I had it up in the air, and I took a metal stool and I put it with a block to rest the axle on so it would go in straight, because like I said, if this axle is, out to here or so before it's through the first bearing, which you also have to beat it through, and it hangs down, it's going to mess up that seal. So don't make that mistake, because you got to pull the whole thing back apart and everything, and pull the axle back out, and then God forbid you don't have the axle already pushed into the first bearing, because it's not fun, and you don't want to mess up your bearing either, because you're gonna have to press it back off. So anyway, moving on. One of the easier things was, once this axle got in, I mean, this is true with all of them, but once they got in through the first bearing, once it pushes through the first bearing, it'll slide almost all the way in until the surface in here seats into the second bearing. So you get through almost all the way. The other bearing, you just pop right in where the tube comes out in there. Can't really see it, but you don't really have to see it to understand it. And then what I did was I put the sprocket on. I could only thread it on a little bit because it wasn't through all the way, but I threaded it on so it can't bounce back and forth when I'm hitting it with the hammer. So then I proceeded to hit it with the hammer here, and what I would do was I'd hit it with the hammer, and I'd also tighten this. Not a lot. Until you get a good bite on it, you do not want to tighten this a lot, because you'll strip that thing right out. So what I did was I would tighten it as I went, tighten it here, bang here with the hammer, tighten it here. Okay, so you just kind of work that back and forth until you almost get it. Once you get it threaded on enough to where you're comfortable, it's got a good bite. Same thing as taking the sprocket off. Throw that wrench on there. Let it go down to the bottom. Hold on. My other chain's in the middle here. There we go. Let it go down to the bottom, underneath the chain, obviously, if you have the other one in there. And then just use this to tighten it. So in this case, you go like this, and you pull that up, and you tighten it. You spin it. This is already tight, so I'm not going to do it, but it makes it a lot easier. Just like I said, make sure you got a good bite. It also does help to bang it with the hammer as you do that, just to, you know, shock usually helps a lot. If you've ever used anything, even with a press, sometimes you gotta give it a whack. It's like doing a ball joint. So as you're getting it to push through there, you just give her a couple whacks here, tighten that sprocket, a couple whacks here, tighten the sprocket. Now, one thing about the sprocket too is it's going to hold that bearing in, so you got to watch out. The tapered roller bearing that's in that race in there, which obviously if you're doing bearings, do the races too. The races are super easy to get out. I actually took a jack handle and I just fed it through this way, and then beat it with the hammer, popped it right out. I mean, it came out like it was nothing. And then the other way, same thing. I just went through. It was long enough I was able to go through the whole tube. So yeah. So now these chains, they said it takes 20 feet of roller chain, 5 feet each side. And I will tell you, it takes exactly 20 feet. You cannot be a link off if you order 20 feet, which is great because none goes to waste. I mean, obviously you gotta drive out one and pull the link off. But like I said, make sure you get this on there and measured and everything first before you break any chain, because the second you break that chain, you know, it's done unless you get more chain, which you don't have to. So get 20 feet of chain, find out exact, and don't measure it dead center. I mean, I guess you can, but what I did was I just fed it through the notches, saw where it was, marked it, and then what I did was I drove out both lengths. So I didn't just drive out just the one. I drove the one out on this side, the one on that side, boom, you got two chains ready to go. These chains are tight, okay? One thing that really surprised me with this machine is there is no tensioning system for these chains besides when you put them on. If they're worn out and they're slack, you need new chain or new sprockets or both. One thing about the older chain that was still on there was it was actually touching the bottom of the case. And what's interesting about that is that it was definitely worn out. There was play in it. I could move it. These chains are so tight, you can move them a teeny bit, but it's not like a motorcycle, you know, where it's like, oh, there's this much play. No, you put this on and it will not fit unless it's on there properly. It's not supposed to hang down, not supposed to, you know, none of that. The clearance there is little to none. I mean, and it's the same way on bottom. So you, and same thing with the back, the bulkhead of the case. So you got to make sure you get this right, and it's not hard at all to do. I'm just trying to make the point that you do not want slack in these. Now, as far as getting the chain together once you put it on, it can be difficult. There's two methods I used that I came up with myself. I think they sell tools for this, but I was able to take these long needle nose, and I was able to put them through the chain like this, and I was able to squeeze it together to the point where I could put the master link in. And that worked for almost all of them, actually probably half of them. The problem is when you have the two pulling on each other, it becomes very difficult. There is no room for slack in any of this whole assembly. So a nice trick that I used to get especially the final chain on, was I actually loosened the drive motor. And what that does is it gives you just enough wiggle room here, even with the other chain on. Now, with that being said, I still did have to use these to pull it together. It's hard to do this when you're doing it by yourself, but you'll get it. Just take your time, go slow. And like I said, you loosen the drive motor, it gives you just barely enough room. So yeah, so that's what worked for me. Another thing that should be noted is when the chains are properly installed and you have the right chains on, obviously, you should not have any play whatsoever with these from each other. So what I mean by that is if you turn this, you know, and you rock it, let's say back and forth, that one should go back and forth exactly the same as this one does. There should not be any delay whatsoever. You know, like when you do like a pinion, and you wiggle it a little bit and you feel the lash adjustment. This should not have that. Okay, there should be hardly any, if any, at all. But in reality, you don't really want any, because that's how it's a recipe for disaster with a skid steer. So when you turn this, both should be exactly the same. They should not be. One should not spin more than the other, and there should be absolutely no delay. So yeah. Oh, something very important that nobody told me and I ended up figuring it out, and then I actually did look up a diagram just to confirm it. As you can see, one chain mounts here, one here for each side. They're offset. Now, I mean, this might be straightforward for somebody, but I have to double check and overthink everything, unfortunately. So all you do with these sprockets to get them to line up properly is you flip them. So what I mean by that is if you're going to run, this chain to the front, which this is the front of the machine, this sprocket needs to be flipped. So the space on it is towards the inside. Now, like I said, pretty straightforward, self-explanatory, but just want to throw it out there for anybody who has questions with these because I could not find the answer. I actually ended up looking up a parts diagram and I saw it. And then same thing with the ones in front. You just flip the sprocket. That's all you do. So it doesn't matter front to back as far as I'm concerned, but yeah, that's what you do. And yeah, we got some cleaning to do. Still got to clean this thing the hell out. There's a lot of dirt and everything in here. Fuel tank's out of it right now being cleaned. The hydraulic tank's coming out getting cleaned. A couple other things. There's a lot of dirt and all down in there. The engine's pulled out of it, started taking the decals off, pulled the rear door off. This is going to get sanded down, painted and all. I really don't know what I'm going to do about the inside yet. I'd like to power wash it pretty good, but it's going to be very, very difficult to do that because moving this thing is a son of a bitch. I mean, I can do it. That'll honestly probably pick it up. And I could probably stuff it on a trailer, but we'll see what happens. I really don't think I'm going to paint the inside of it just because it's going to be a real pain in the ass. I think I'm just going to go with the outside of it. I'm going to pull the cab off, do that separately. There's some other stuff I got to work on in there. Gauges and all that whole cluster's kind of falling out of the machine. I don't know if you can see that up there. So that's going to get pulled off. The lap bar's got to get cleaned up. Got new grips for the handles and something very cool because I converted it. I thought it would be a good idea to get a diesel cap. So originally, you got to remember that this is a 642B. So originally, this is actually a gas engine. This one, I believe, had, I think it was a Mazda engine in it. So yeah, she's getting the Isuzu stuffed back in her. You can see there I machined the flywheel and everything to adapt to it. One thing with these, and actually this is one of the more common things you read online, is you got to grease the hell out of this right here, your little universal, because it's very hard to get to, and nobody greases them. So yep, the Isuzu will be going back in there. We'll see how she does. Hopefully the performance is good. If it's not, we'll deal with it when we get there. So it's supposed to be very similar in horsepower, and it's diesel, so it should have more torque. Something that these machines need a lot more than horsepower because there's no high flow on this or anything. But we'll see how it goes. Bucket's gonna come off and get painted. Why is my phone doing that? My lens is dirty here. But yeah, the bucket's gonna come off, get painted, maybe sandblasted, get painted. There's a little crack in there. I got in the back corner of it, up in the top right corner. I don't know if you could see that right there. That's gonna have to get welded and plated, and I gotta check the rest of the bucket. The bucket seems pretty straight, doesn't seem that bad. The thing, honestly, probably just sat with water in it like most things, and that's probably how that developed. But yep, so hopefully she'll get some paint and some love soon. Yep, stay tuned for more updates.